And to start off, I just want to share some information with y'all about our partners. So again, this is the 2020 Brown Bag Lunch and Learn series. Today's session is all about managing stormwater and low impact development. Am I right, Hana?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. And this is just a slide that includes all of our partners. We have City of Birmingham Stormwater, Jefferson County Stormwater Program, Leeds, Alabama. Is it their stormwater program?
They do have a stormwater program.
Okay. The Leeds Stormwater Program, the Stormwater Management Authority, Alabama Green Industry with the Alabama Cooperative Extension. We also have Alabama Cooperative Extension on there. And then, of course, the Jefferson County Department of Health. These are all our partners. They help us put on these sessions and organize them. And we're just so grateful for them. And we really appreciate them taking the time to help us plan this and just be a part of this brown bag series. And today's poster is talking about reduced runoff. Again, we do a calendar every year. It's completely free. You can get it when you attend our lunch and learns in person, or if you just decide to come up to the gardens, you can always just contact me and let me know that you want a calendar for the year. We're working on a calendar for next year, so that should be done soon. And they include all these cool posters, pictures of different sites around the city that you might not have known about, and just tips about how to be a better steward of your the water that we use, whether it's rainwater, runoff, everything. So I'm going to stop sharing. And today, our presenter is Hana Barris, and she is with the Jefferson County Stormwater Program, and she is one of our great partners for this program, as well as some other things, including our Rain Barrel workshop, which we just had in June. She's been doing stormwater management for over 20 years, and she really knows what she's talking about. She's a great, she's a great speaker, and just a real down-to-earth people person that can explain things to you that you thought you would never understand about stormwater in the best way. And so without further ado, I'm going to stop my video and mute myself so that Hana can do her presentation for you all.
Oh my gosh, I don't know what to say about all that. Now I'm getting nervous. All right, I'm going to see if I can remember see if I can start sharing my screen. All right, Donna, let me know if did I make it? Hooray! Welcome today. So this is my first talking on a Zoom presentation, so bear with me, I'm not sure where to look here. But we're going to be talking about how to manage your stormwater, or sometimes not managing your stormwater. Next slide. Oh no, it won't go forward. It did it in the thing. I'm doing the arrow. Hold on, bear with me. I'm going to stop sharing. Let's see what we can do here. I'm going to click the screen share again. I'm going to go here. And share screen. Okay, let's see if, well, here, we'll work down here, see if this works. All right, so first I'm going to talk to y'all about water. Water is everyone's problem. Our body is made mostly up of water, and water is a finite resource. In other words, it doesn't get created nor destroyed. We know that because of the water cycle, where we have precipitation, infiltration, transpiration, evaporation, and condensation. Water is also a universal solvent, which makes it pretty awesome, but it also makes it pretty difficult when you deal with water runoff. In Alabama, there are different places that use our water. So the obvious is agriculture, but that's actually only 3%. Public water supply and residential use is about 9%, and industry in Alabama takes up about 88%. Let's talk about Alabama. In Alabama, we get roughly 55 inches of rain a year. However, we don't get it half an inch every 3 days. We get a lot or none at all. So our weather is getting more extreme as time moves on, as we all know. When you talk about Alabama soils, especially here in Jefferson County, we have old, weathered, dry soils. It's mostly full of clay and chert. If you've ever taken a shovel and tried to dig in your backyard. What about our waterways? Did y'all realize that 10% out of all the upper continental waterways start and or flow through the great state of Alabama? We have 132,000 miles of streams. Now let's talk a little bit about stormwater runoff. What is it? It's rain that falls from the sky, lands on the ground, and in our case, when we have developed areas, we have channelized it, put it into pipes, and pretty much rush it as quickly as we can to the nearest lake, river, creek, and stream. The picture that you see here, you see that there's a little residential and there's a little roads, and then you see at the very bottom that water falls literally through an outfall to the nearest lake, creek, and stream. Okay, now let's talk about land use. So what happens on the land is going to impact the volume of stormwater that we have and also the quality of stormwater. So the picture that you see here is of a watershed, and no two watersheds are the same. I'll explain a watershed a little later, but just get to the premise point where you have mountains and you have valleys, and no matter where that rain falls within that designated area, it's going to one common place, which would be a stream. Okay, now let's talk about development. And development is not a bad thing. Our practices have been that we have an area of land and we want to add houses there because it's a cool place to live. So under non-development, which you see at the very top, so you have a natural stream, it rains, the stream expands a little bit, and then after it rains, the stream goes back down into a small area. On the bottom part, you have development. And the easiest way when we have developers and engineers is to straight pipe that stream, channelize it so that we could build houses on either side. And when we do that, we're changing the land structure. So it's moving towards an area where water cannot get absorbed, called impervious, from a pervious where where water could absorb. So what happens often when we have development, we straight pipe that creek and build houses on both sides, develop it. We end up with potential flooding. So here's another description that a lot of people might not have thought about before. At the very top left, you see natural forest. When it rains, water is able to penetrate the soil and replenish what we call the aquifer. And what does run off goes to a river, lake, creek, and stream. And in undeveloped areas, the streams themselves don't rise all that much unless it's a huge storm. Now let's look at the bottom. So when we have an area that we want to develop, the process really is to denude the land and rebuild it back up. When you do that, you have to channelize your runoff. Again, when you have more concrete, asphalt, rooftops, driveways, impervious areas, you have to manage the volume of that water. Engineers do that through a series of pipes, and then they channelize it, as you see in the bottom right-hand corner. So here's another picture, just to give you a bigger example. Some people are like, well, my property's not really that big. Does it really make that much of a difference? When you look at a bird's eye view and you see the volume of driveways, sidewalks, rooftops, roads, all these items, again, are impervious. The more impervious areas we have, the less we have water to infiltrate into that ground, which means we're going to end up with more runoff. Now, some people don't really know what a storm sewer system is. And a few years ago, I decided I'm just going to start showing people because I realized me telling them what it is versus visually looking at it might be quite different. So we're just for sake here, I'm going to start off with a gutter. I recognize not everybody has gutters on their house, but someplace off your rooftop, water is going to leave your property. In developed areas, and even in undeveloped areas, you might have a curb inlet, which you see is the second slide. That could either be a concrete structure like this or a great inlet, but it's on the side of a curb in the road. We also have open ditches and channels. Regardless of what you have, they all flow underground into a series of pipes. And these pipes connect to an area, some place you might not see it, but it'll flow to a local river, lake, creek, and stream. Bottom left is what you see as a pipe, and we in the industry call that an outfall. So that's where water falls out of the pipe and goes to the nearest waterway. Some places, like if you ever go over to Elder Street in Irondale, you'll see a large culvert, so a big pipe. And the big pipe leads to an open area where the creek is now daylit and goes into other, joins other waterways. If you have a really large area, sometimes you have water that's connected, such as Valley Creek. So if you're over there on Graymont, you'll see larger culverts, wide, that you can actually walk through, that will contain water from various places. But yet again, all our water is our runoff water is channeled and makes its way to the nearest lake, river, creek, and stream. So this whole series right here is called the stormwater drainage system. If it is independent of the sanitary sewer, which ours in Alabama are, it's called a municipal separate storm sewer system, or MS4 for short. Okay, when we channelize water, it's going to move faster and we're going to get more of it. That's just how it works. And these sometimes create some complications that we might not have thought about, or the more impervious areas we have, the more volume of water we get. When you channelize this water, it's going to move quicker from point A to B. So now the velocity of that water has increased. Okay, what we do at home matters. I'm going to talk just real quickly the things you might not thought about. For example, washing your car. So you might say to me, I use low phosphorus chemicals. I'm going to respond and say, but what about all that gunk that you washed off your car? It's going to, attach to the water, or I say attach, is going to wash with the water to the local creek. Picking up dog waste. People say, well, that's a plastic bag. That's not environmental. Dog waste has a lot of bacteria and viruses in it. The environmentally safe thing to do is use a plastic bag. Always pick up your poop. Don't put it in the storm drain. Tie the bag and dispose of it properly. Most bags that you purchase for this purpose, they're biodegradable. And then also, for those of y'all do yard work, I'm a big component. Don't fertilize concrete. You won't grow more concrete with fertilizer. And sometimes we overspray. Just be mindful and sweep it up and don't wash it. Vehicles. Even though we are very diligent about maintaining our vehicles, every once in a while we drop a few drops, but does one drop matter? It does accumulatively. So if you do drop a drop, then please make sure that you clean it up. And if you're in a parking lot, I recognize that might not be something that you can do, but make sure that you go and get your car maintained to stop that leak. Top right-hand corner could be a weekend warrior not covering their landscape pile. It could be that somebody's dog just dug a big hole in their yard. It also could be years of erosion under a tree where water has been washing and tree roots have been emerging. Whatever it is, dirt, soil, silt, rock in a waterway is detrimental to the waterway. So always try to cover your bare soil, use mulch. And then the bottom right-hand corner, that's Shades Creek over by Highway 150. That's what we call in the industry as a floatable. And this is a canoe. I canoed. This is a picture I took. And most of the items that you see in there are styrofoam drink bottles and single-use plastic bottles. We always try to remember and remind people to dispose of your items correctly. because they will wash to the nearest waterway. Now let's talk about a drainage basin. What you see right here in the green part is the Mobile drainage basin. There are areas in Alabama that don't drain through Mobile. The top part of Tennessee kicks over to the Mississippi, but it all flows to the Gulf of Mexico. Again, Alabama has 10% out of all the fresh water in the upper continental United States that starts and flows through Alabama. I wanted to zoom in because a little watershed makes up a bigger watershed, makes up an even bigger watershed. So I wanted to tie it in, especially those living here in Jefferson County. You see Jefferson County outlined in the Mobile Basin, where we have two, what I would consider at this point, sub-basins from the Mobile. And that would be Black Warrior and the Cahaba. You can see some of the facts located to the left about the Mobile Basin. I wanted to zoom in a little bit closer because some people, when I talk to them about watersheds, are, oh, I don't live in a watershed. Well, yes, you do. Everyone does. So I thought it would be beneficial for people to understand a little bit more about the watersheds that we have here in Jefferson County. We are really blessed. We have 10 major significant watersheds, which you can see here. The black arrows identify how the creeks flow. One of the other things that I get a lot is, oh, I didn't know creeks can flow north. Yes, water flows to the area of least resistance and it can flow north according to a map. Just to give you a relation of where we are, you have Vulcan. Everybody pretty much knows Vulcan if you're from and or live in and around Jefferson County. Vulcan sits on top of a ridge line, if y'all weren't familiar, and that ridge line is the Red Mountain Ridgeline Divide. Jefferson County sits at the very end of the Appalachian Mountains and the beginning or at the end of the Cumberland Plateau. We're very, very hilly, and because of that, we have a big divide. The big black line that you see here divides the Cahaba watershed and the Black Warrior watershed. Where Vulcan sits though, Vulcan sits on top of the hill. Vulcan faces 5 Points South, which is in the Valley Creek watershed, which drains to the Black Warrior. And he moons Homewood, which is part of the Shades Creek watershed, which is the Cahaba, which flows into the Cahaba Basin. Now let's talk about the great state of Alabama. Did y'all know that Alabama is one of the most diverse states when it comes to fish? We're actually #1 in something more than football. You can see this beautiful infographic that Alabama Water Watch in partnership with the USGS created about our waterways. It will be available for download and you can look at it later, but I wanted to make sure that people knew about this. It's pretty awesome. Now let's talk about some problems with water. Why do we need water regulations? Well, not only did water is used in a lot of industry all over the world. In America, here in Pittsburgh and Ohio, they have a lot of steel. And part of that industry, there was some problems and their waterways were getting polluted. And y'all might recognize the Chahoga River, which caught on fire in 1969. That was the last time it caught on fire. And this created a huge campaign around the United States and pretty much was the result of Earth Day coming. If y'all don't recall who the president was at that time, it would be Nixon. And Nixon said, this is a problem to the American citizens. I'm going to do something about it. And he actually started and said, we're going to fix this problem by 1985. Well, that didn't really happen. However, he had a good plan, he had a good concept, and I'm glad that he didn't stop, and presidents and our Congress, our future congressmen haven't stopped either. Water regulations actually started in America as late as 1800, but the first one that you can find on the books would be the Federal Water Pollution Control Act of 48. 1972, this act gets amended, Environmental Protection Agency gets created, and this act around then is now then commonly referred to as the Clean Water Act. The same act gets amended in 1987 to include non-point source pollution. So pollution that comes from everyday people through stormwater, and it's not industrial pollution, which quote unquote they were taken care of as part of the 1972 Clean Water Act. There are 3 different types of permits, which are, you see up there, NPDES. Well, that stands for National Pollutant Detection Elimination System. So the first one that they started off was the industrial. That was one that was started through the Clean Water Act. The second one that they came in 1987 was the Municipal Separate Storm Sewer System, again called MS4 for short. And right after that, in about 2000, was the NEPTIS construction permit. But where I work and what governs the stormwater is that MS4 NPDES permit. So here in Alabama, so basically EPA designates and says, or Congress designates EPA. EPA says to local states, hey, if you have a certain amount of water and a certain amount of population, we need you to comply under a Phase 1 National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System permit. So an acronym's enough. A NEPTIS, an ADEM, NEPTIS, MS4 permit. Okay, so what does that mean to us in Alabama? Here in Jefferson County, we were targeted, as well as the city of Birmingham and 25 other local cities, to comply for stormwater Phase 1. There's other places, it wasn't just here in Jefferson County, but there were other places around our state that also were required to get permits. You can see them listed. Okay, now I work for Jefferson County. Even though I work for Jefferson County, I partner with all my other local stormwater programs. While each program is slightly different, we have very common components. And my components are shown here on this screen. One of them is public education and public involvement. But we have 11 other permits here, and we are also required to educate our elected officials and everybody on all the other permit requirements. So education, while it carries its own, just one, we overlap into a lot of the other requirements as well. It doesn't matter who is implementing a Phase 1 or a Phase 2 stormwater permit. The goal of all MS4 NEPTIS permits is to prevent pollutants from getting into our local waterways or being illegally or improperly dumped. So let's talk about pollution and where it comes from. It's wind and it's rain. Remember, rain, water, the universal solvent. Anything that comes in contact with rain or is blown by wind ends up in our local waterways. Again, because stormwater is not treated here in Alabama, our stormwater is not treated. So in this slide right here, again, going back to pre-development versus post-development and what happens to your runoff, to bring it again home in what they call a natural environment. So basically a non-developed area, you end up with about 50% of your runoff gets filtered into the ground and 10% runs off. Some happens through evaporation. On the right-hand side, you see that 55% on average from impervious areas run off, and we only have about 15% that gets filtered in. So this new, and I say new idea, it's really not new, but one of our current goals is let's just reduce runoff. If we can reduce runoff, we have a better opportunity to reduce some of the pollutants. This slide Rhonda showed in our Rain Barrel workshop, and it actually comes from Eve and the Extension water program. And this really hit home and resonated with me. I'm a visual person, and I hope y'all do too, especially in the time of COVID. We've been hearing flatten the curve, flatten the curve. And this slide right here shows you what happens when you have impervious areas versus non-impervious areas. So the red is impervious areas when it rains. That's a lot of runoff over time. The green is when we have more opportunities in a natural environment, what happens to your runoff. So the goal is, let's be green, let's try to flatten the curve, and let's try to do things in and around our environment, whichever it is, so that we can capture water where it falls. I'm going to say real simply put, let's reduce your runoff. And this slide resonates with homeowners, and I see it a lot. And if you live in Jefferson County and pay water bills, one thing that you don't want to do is have excess water running off into concrete, into the storm drain. So pay attention, don't water, you know, just real simple, divert your sprinklers, make sure they're running correctly, use drip irrigation, and also soaker hoses. It'll help save on your water bill too. So we're going to try to mimic Mother Nature. How do you do that? Slow it down, spread it out, soak it in. Slowing it down helps try to get more water into the ground as in pre-development. Spreading it out, not only are you going to help with evaporation, but you're also going to reduce the amount that goes into our stormwater system. Again, flatten that curve. Soaking it in, the more we can soak it in, the less we run off. So there's a term that's been out and about for about 10 years, really mostly for about 5, and is really gaining strength in the last few years. It's called low impact development green infrastructure. So basically, what does that mean? It pretty much just means that we're going to try to manage that rainfall at the source, keep it close to where it falls. There's various techniques and practices, and they're listed below. I'm going to go over a few of these just to bring it home again. So I was laughing with Lynn, who's my colleague, and I told her during this presentation, I'm going to try to shove as many pictures of my yard as I possibly can, because I love yards, I love gardening, and I also bought a house on the low side of the street, and I'm having massive runoff issues. So when you first look at your yard, I want you to think of where can you manage your stormwater? Why do you need to manage your stormwater? This is a picture of my backyard, and I've created different aspects so that I can capture as much water, hold it as close as I can from my impervious areas like walkways and driveways. The other part, when you do low impact development, you increase opportunities for plants, if you're an avid gardener like myself, and also wildlife. Okay, so let's talk about natural areas. Natural area isn't some place that you leave desolate and allow seedlings and weeds to overtake. Natural areas are planned areas, make them curvy like a lady so that you can capture as much water and give you visual interest. The area to the left is coming off of that concrete drive, and the area on the top is coming off the back of my house. I've got areas, and I had a lot of chert and clay. I've amended the soil with lots of stuff. But these areas are to help me capture, slow the water down, and spreading it out. Hopefully I can get it to infiltrate in. Using mulch is one of the easiest things to help stop runoff. And I want to talk to you maybe a little bit about a ping pong game, or a pinball machine. So if you think of mulch, so when you have a pinball machine, the goal is to have that ball and keep it in play for as long as possible. The same thing would deal with stormwater. You don't want that ball, if you didn't hit your bumpers at all and you shot that ball and it wiggled down, it would go probably straight and game over. What we're trying to do here using mulch is to break the speed using a little bit of bumpers for that rainwater. And when we say mulch and ground covers, it can come in many different forms. So some people like their pine straw, and pine straw is used on a big slope. That's the top far left-hand side, that's in my yard. The middle picture is in my sister's yard, and it was a flat area where a tree stump was. So she's used ground cover here so that her topsoil won't wash. On the top right-hand side, that's also my yard, and we've used Selma Brown gravel as a mulch. It helps deter weeds, and it also helps slow the flow of that water coming off my roof. And the bottom left, I want you to think about different ground covers that could also be used. Not only is a good breaker, but it's also visually aesthetically pleasing, and it's also pollinator. That right there is creeping ground time, and pretty awesome stuff if you aren't aware. And it blooms. Okay, some other things that you can quickly do is just take down your downspout or divert your downspout to a vegetated area. And the picture on the left, you see in a commercial application where they've taken their downspout. The material underneath are rocks. So what they're doing, that would not be a good application for some type of organic type material, mulch and pine bark. You need something a little heavier so that that water doesn't break it and shove it, break it and cause a little bit of erosion and therefore sedimentation. And the picture on the top, That's somebody's downspout, and they put it into a natural area. That's actually a rain garden. But diverting and disconnecting downspouts is probably the obvious. This here also is my backyard. We have a rain barrel, and attached to that rain barrel is a downspout. The overflow, which you can see highlighted, you can't really see because I've got vegetation. That was the whole point of it. But this is a shady, wet area. It also collects water that's coming off the front of my property, and we have hidden a corrugated pipe that helps spread that overflow water that doesn't fill into my rain barrel. Okay, even people that are in stormwater business and recognize how much water comes off of a roof, thank you, Rhonda Britton, you have taught me over the years, sometimes you can imagine the force that water has. So in this picture, I wanted to show you that water is forceful. Even though I had built up that bed, those are reused landscape pavers from another area project in my house. But when I diverted some of the water off of another rain barrel and put it underneath my deck, it popped out and blew out. Those are 12-foot concrete or pavers. And as you can see, the top two looks like two buck teeth laying on the ground, and all my yummy, delicious soil in there has washed into my, yes, it is weeded. I don't use too many chemicals, but into my zoysia grass and weeds. So I just want you to be mindful and careful that when you concentrate water in an area, sometimes you need to, even with the best laid plans and the yummy, delicious soil, accidents can happen. Some people don't have a lot of room to manage their water. So when we look at the top left, what they have done is they've made a curvy little area, designated area for their roof to drain to the street. Now, granted, that doesn't, what you're saying is, but Hana, I thought we wanted to reduce the flow. Yes, but in this case, what they've done is they've stabilized the bank and allowed a very pretty aesthetic way for the water to go. And those rocks are gonna act like baby, speed bumps in the small, slow rain. In a harsh rain, no, it's not. But this is defining an area or a channel for your rainwater to go so that we don't end up with gullies and washers, and we don't end up with sedimentation because of erosion from that raindrop. In the top right-hand side, you can see that somebody did this in their backyard. Obviously, they had a little more room. And again, you can see they used more pebbles and rocks to slow the flow of that water. Again, think of that pinball machine. This is my backyard. Down here, when I first moved in, again, I moved into a house that was below street grade, and I have a lot of runoff coming from a lot of different places. So in the picture on the left, it's taken about 10, well, it was a little less than 10 years, but my plants aren't up, and it was before I started managing the area back here. This is one of the last of the plantings. But in this area on the left, you can see the contour of where the water flows, and you can see the new fence. My old fence rotted because it sat in the middle of the drainage area. So what I've done is I extended, I had room, and that's my property, so I was able to do it. And I got a permit from the city of Birmingham. So I was able to extend my fence up, got it out of the drainage way, and I created basically my own channel. You can see on the right-hand side. I've reapplied rocks that I found around the yard, and any limbs. I have some pecans that love to drop limbs. I've reapplied the limbs so that I've channeled an area to create a water path for my rainwater to go. This is another area of my yard, and this slide came out of order because I wanted to show you, if you remember that blowout I had at the very beginning, that orange arrow was showing you where that blowout occurred. But this is a different area a little above where the stormwater channel is. But I wanted to talk about the pervious areas. I've got some bricks. I needed to break up. This is where my compost pile is and how it gets me down into the other part of my yard. But using bricks, which is, yes, bricks are pervious, but they also they're impervious. But in this area, it allows me to, in between the bricks, there's only sand. So that area helps. Again, acts more like a bumper. I can slow the flow of the water and allow the water to seep in through the bricks. And I'm trying to do this because I get a lot of wash from the very top over by where our second driveway on the side is, and our deck and our concrete sidewalk. So it's coming off the zoysia. I want to try to break it up. So always try to include different sources to slow the flow and get that water to absorb in. There's other things that you can do in different developments. This particular picture is taken off on Morris Avenue. So they did a redevelopment. They were trying to stop the amount of flow going on to Morris Avenue. So the developer of this property thought outside the box and started using some permeable pavers. So permeable pavers allow water. You can see that there's room on the inside and there's a media underneath that allows water that comes off. And you can see I'm highlighting the gutter. So water coming off of the roof goes to this area and it gets absorbed in this area and less is washed to the street, which is benefit to our local creeks, especially in heavily developed areas. There's different facilities that do stuff. This is the Birmingham Botanical Gardens. They have permeable pavement. So this is more of an asphalt type material. This material was strategically placed, or they placed this material so that they could have less runoff that goes into the rose garden. But if you ever come to the Botanical Gardens, I hope that you look at it. It's pretty awesome to watch. And if rain, it just absolutely absorbs right underneath right there. So this application is in other facilities, but I wanted to highlight specifically what the Botanical Gardens does. This photo is also in our current calendar. So trees. A lot of people don't think about the benefit of trees. And so when rain falls, when you have a canopy of a tree, the rain is going to hit the leaves. Well, if it's leafed out, but the rain's going to hit the leaves and it's going to break the speed of that raindrop. Rain falls from the sky pretty darn fast. It's going to hit that leaf canopy. It's going to slow the flow. It's going to spread out the velocity and the energy in that raindrop. And it's going to trickle doo, 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 all the way through the leaf canopy to the ground. Again, think of that pinball machine. Trees also are responsible for taking up water from your yard. If you have a perennial landscape like I do in big trees are going to win. You're going to have to excess water, especially when we don't get that much like last year. So the roots of trees are also important to stormwater because especially the trees that have roots on the surface, because they're going to act like tiny little speed bumps. In the picture in the top right where you see the yellow arrow, there are some municipalities that are utilizing trees for stormwater management. You see, instead of that curb inlet that goes into pipes, it actually goes into a water-loving tree. That tree is going to absorb that water, evaporate that water out into the back out into the atmosphere, and it's going to be beneficial. So trees, don't discount trees in your landscape. And I wanted to talk, this picture right here is Black Creek Park in Fultondale, and the common practice, and sometimes it still is, but we're trying to change that, was to clean out an area, plant small little token trees along the side, give room for a cute little creek, and put a bridge on top. It's also, as you see, been channelized, so it's lost the S shape. It's now just a straight pipe. So you can see that we've got erosion on the banks. And again, let's go back to the trees. If trees in their natural canopy along the stream were still there, those roots are going to help stabilize and hold back that bank. So when you get big rainfalls like we did here in 2006 in Black Creek Park, the inevitable, and I explain this to people and they're like, oh, I never thought about that. Because in the picture prior, we took out the natural floodplain. So when you hear organizations like we heard Liz last week from Freshwater Land Trust, they do some pretty awesome things. And this is happening in a lot of municipalities. We're putting back in the floodplain. It's an area that has good vegetation, native vegetation, meant to hold the soil around. And so when we have large volumes of water, we've got areas for that water to flood out. If you've ever been over to Jefferson Park, there was a huge project in along Lakeshore over there. That also they've rebuilt back in the floodplain, which is meant to keep the water off the street and yet still not erode our soil and harm our waters. So If you are ever out and about, there's a means to have these areas canopied. In other words, that they've got vegetation on the side and not just shrubs and stuff, but it's there to hold the soil back, help absorb the water, and make it good for everybody. So Dawn mentioned we do have a rain barrel workshop here. It's Father's Day weekend here at the Botanical Gardens. If you haven't participated, I highly recommend you do. It's great fun. Rain barrels are really cool. They help capture, hold, and store water. You can have one, you can have multiple. The top picture on the right-hand side is a master gardener friend of mine, Patricia. Her and Steve were very gracious to allow us to include that in this year's calendar. And on the picture on the left, I just wanted to say, you don't have to be limited to just one. And if Rhonda was here, she'd say, well, Hana, you don't have to limit just to a rain barrel. You could put in a cistern, and there are a lot of industries that do. I also highly recommend, if you're in the capability of building your own house, that you think about this, and in designing your landscape, you can do a concrete cistern while you're pouring the footings. So that way you can capture, hold, and reuse water for your landscape. So a common practice that a lot of people hear about these days are called rain gardens, and they're shallow areas specifically designed to capture and hold water. As an avid gardener, it excites me because that's an area you can put in your pollinator plants. These plants are specifically designed for this media and structure so that they can handle large volumes of water. Their feet, their roots can be wet and sustained being wet for a little while, and they could also sustain drought conditions. Rain gardens are pretty awesome. They actually did a study early on. This is about a 10-year-old study, or it happened in 2003, which, oh, that's 7 years. Anyway, so I try to always give updated, that was 2003. That was a little more than 7 years. Oh my goodness. Okay, so 17 years ago, they had this study, and it was along a lake. On the bottom, you could see that there's just natural curb and gutter. And part of the study was they were taking two streets with the same amount of household draining to the same lake. In the top, what they did is they replaced on one street their curb and gutter and installed rain gardens. When we talk about flattening the curve, if you can see that graph right there, the graph on the top is pre-installation of the rain gardens. So you have red and blue lines, and they look like a heartbeat, like an EKG line. On the bottom, you can barely see the red. The red line is the runoff from the street where they installed rain gardens. Capturing and holding water is important. Now, this community lived on a lake, so they were able to remove 90% of their runoff, which also included phosphorus and the heating effect of water washing to the creeks and streams. So you can read more. There's a link to the study that they did, but it's pretty cool stuff. So we can put rain gardens in different areas. They can be any size, custom fit to you. You don't even have to be a homeowner to install a rain garden. On the top right-hand side, if you visit and patronize the Birmingham Zoo, this is their rain garden. It's pretty awesome that they collect and hold their water from some of their roofs, and they collect it, goes into a cistern, and it percolates out into different areas. They reuse theirs. And then the top left, this is a little larger one that's at the end of a parking area. Well, you don't have to do that. Along streets, we can put in planter boxes. And a planter box difference between a rain garden is a planter box has solid structure walls, and they're more vertical than round. But the concept is the same. Let's capture it, let's hold it, let's spread it out. We also have items called bioswells. So what's the difference between a rain garden, a planter box, and a bioswell? Bioswells don't have standard structures like the planter box. And bioswells are linear places along roadways and sidewalks. So it's less circular and more linear. The concept still is the same. Capture, hold, and these bioswells also, let me add, they use certain vegetation to help collect and pull out some of the pollutants from the roadways and walkways. So they do have a little bit more, but the concept behind them is the same. Capture, hold, store, treat as much as you can. We have bioswells here locally. If you've ever been to the Trustful High School, it's a LEED certified building. The first two pictures right there on the left are of their parking area. Some people might say, "Ooh, that's too woodsy," and "Oh, that's not organized." They are also located directly on the Cahaba River. So it was important for us to hold and maintain all those things that could possibly come from vehicles before it getting into our creeks. Much rather absorb it into the ground and have our vegetation and plants take it up than for it to go into our drinking water source. Picture on the top right is from Tuscaloosa. Again, the concept is the same. It's at the end of a parking lot. It's got vegetation to help slow the flow of that water. And also water that's come over asphalt and other concrete surfaces on 100 temperature days is hot. These plants can sustain that really, really hot water coming off as runoff. So another thing that you might see, and this is commonplace, is a stormwater retention pond. Now, stormwater retention ponds don't have to always hold water. The one you're looking here particularly is at Birmingham Southern, and they have water all year. So we can also refer to this as a wet pond. In the very back, you see the overflow. So if we get a large amount of water and the water gets to the pond's not going to overflow. It's going to go in through that overflow into another pond. But again, their goal from their whole campus is to capture and slow that flow of that water. This pond also has native plants surrounding it, and the plants not only help take up some of the pollutants that are coming from the parking lots and the other areas. It's meant also for a wildlife. It supports wildlife, and there's also a fountain in it, and the fountain that's not pictured in here helps aerate the water so we can add more oxygen back to the water, which supports wildlife, and it helps cool down the water effect from the hot surfaces. Now in this picture, it's also at Birmingham Southern. You can have smaller settling ponds before you get to bigger settling ponds. So I wanted to show you this picture. They have a series of these. Sometimes people call them rain gardens on a large scale, or they're also called a settling pond. Whatever you want to call it, it is to hold and capture rainwater. You can see that if water gets too high, it will flow over into that inlet right there, and it goes into the big pond. The vegetation, this next slide, is the same, Birmingham Southern, but these particular ponds are meant to work in all seasons, and there's vegetation that could be beneficial to wildlife, especially if you use natives. They know what to do, they love water, and they can also support the function of the rain garden. I'm not sure if you know what this photo is, but it is a railroad park. Railroad Park is a phenomenal place. In their landscape design, they have a lot of low impact green infrastructures. They have what's considered a biofiltration system. So they have areas of different ponds that the water goes through. It helps filter it out, different chemicals and sediments, and it helps slow the flow before it can get back into Valley Creek. So pretty awesome stuff that we get to do here. They also have a wetland area, which I might not have talked about. They've just got some really cool stuff. So I highly recommend, not only is it pretty to look at, but what they're trying to do is they're trying to capture a lot of water coming off of developed areas, hold it, and provide opportunities for wildlife, and gives us a good view while we go and exercise. Some people might have heard green roofs. Why don't we do more of them? In larger cities, they are, because they're having to really contend with their stormwater because of flooding. Green roofs not only hold water, it also helps insulate the building, so there's other benefits. On a larger scale building, you can have picnic tables and place for your employees and staff to go visit that kind of calms them down during their lunch hour and kind of puts them back in a good spirit to come back to work. So we here in Birmingham have a few green roofs. Birmingham Zoo actually has a small green roof. The Children's Hospital has a memory sensory garden on their roof, and there's one downtown. I can't remember the building because I'm put on the spot right now. My brain just forgot. But we do have green roofs. They are up and coming. We also have a lot of greenways. The picture on the right is part of the Rotary Trail. And the thing about greenways is not only does it give places for us to go out and exercise, it also gives areas that were prone to contaminating our local water and a large volume of water to change. This right here is Xeriscape, which is a form of putting plants that will do well in certain environments. It's not watered. These plants know how to live in harsh conditions. And the trail is a little curvy. It's meant to allow water to flow off, and it drains into the side vegetation. But this right here, Rotary Trail, was an old railroad bed that used to be under grade. They raised it 6 feet above grade. This particular area flows to Village Creek. Village Creek, as you know, is prone to flooding. So what the city did is they not only made it a pretty cool place and connects Railroad Park to Sloss Furnace, but they also helped stop some of the contaminants from the old railroad bed, lifted it up, installed various media to help capture and hold stormwater so that we have less flooding. And it gives us a great opportunity to get out and get some exercise. Even here in the Botanical Gardens, I wanted to say that no one is above drainage issues. Even if properly planned and maintained, when you have development upstream, things happen. And over time, just natural settling of the ground is going to happen. So I wanted to bring to light something local since we're here at the Botanical Gardens. This is of their rose garden, of the Barber formal rose garden. They had some drainage issues you can see in the top left, which is common on a lot of places. They came in and they engineered and organized different types of storm drain systems. You can see the pipe. And on the bottom, they came back in and resodded so that they wouldn't have those soggy issues. Of course, you know, roses don't really like a lot of wet feet, so they needed to do something. So they did. So I just wanted to show you that just because things are developed doesn't mean that they're prone to not having drainage issues over time. What they did with the water was kind of cool. Instead of shipping it directly to their creek, they ship it over there to the Alabama woodlands, to the Barber Alabama woodlands. And the area in the top right, that area was designed to flood. So not only do we have high tree canopy, and we have plants in there like cypresses that are meant to gather and collect and use water, they acted this as a floodplain, which was awesome, an awesome resource to hold it on site so that they can help control and manage some of their rainwater runoff. And at the front, sometimes when you come in the Botanical Gardens, you often see that Sonnet Lake is dry. And you're like, well, it should be a lake. It should have water. It's actually a stormwater control system. It captures water from the main street and above. It holds water so that they don't put all that water in the creek that runs over through the Japanese garden and then down through and joins Shades Creek right there at Cahaba River Parkway. So they also have a fountain there, which not only looks nice, but what they're doing is they're aerating the water so that we're adding more oxygen. And this also helps cool down the water because it's just come from some asphalt. So kudos to the Botanical Gardens for being such a good steward of the environment and their stormwater runoff. So what you do matters. Top left, that is just something that we should never do. There should only be rain in the storm drain. Right, Dorikas Cooper? So pouring anything other than rainwater in the storm drain is not a good idea. Now, your air conditioning condensate is a different story. The one in the middle on the left, I want you to always read and follow label directions. If you have questions about gardening, there is Dr. Jacoby here at the Birmingham Botanical Gardens facility upstairs. You can contact him and any of our local extension agents, but please be mindful and use and follow label instructions. If you're not familiar, ask. There's a lot of people and a lot of resources that we have to help. Bottom left-hand corner, we've already talked about the chemicals that come off of vehicles. And in the middle, that sadly is a common occurrence. And with COVID, we've actually seen an increase in litter from fast food restaurants and styrofoam cups. So please be mindful. Littering is free to stop, cost you no dollars. There's trash cans at gas stations. You have a trash can at home. So please, 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 and if you know anybody that does, encourage them to do the same. Top right-hand corner, that's Lily, the little puppy there, and always pick up and bag and properly dispose of your pet waste. And please tarp and tie your load. Can't tell you how many things blow out of the end of a trailer and truck bed. And I would be remiss if I didn't tell you of ways that you can dispose of your items correctly. In partnership with my other stormwater programs, like the Health Department, the Stormwater Management Authority, City of Birmingham, City of Bessemer, City of Leeds, and I'm sorry if I forgot one, Keep Birmingham Beautiful, Jefferson County Conservation District, all together, we offer no charge for people to attend these events. We have a Household Hazardous Waste Day coming up July 25th, 3 locations. And we also have, in addition, an electronic and paper shredding day on August 8th. We will send this information and flyers in our survey link after the survey. But you can always call me if you have questions. And Dawn was talking about the Stormwater Calendar. On the right-hand side, we highlighted the Rotary Trail, and that was our 2020 Stormwater Calendar. I've already completed, it's at the printer. We have our 2021 Stormwater Calendar. The calendar for 2021 is going to feature our waterways. We highlight 6 local waterways and also different types of pollutants from our permit. Anybody that knows me knows that I'm a native nut. What does that mean? I like plants that know what to do in our environment. Doesn't mean that they're chemical and pest free. On the contrary, I invite bugs to my yard so that the birds can have something to feed their babies. Please always consider adding some natives, and add natives that bloom and provide and support wildlife 12 months out of the year. I recognize there's a reason for an ornamental plant, and I have them in my yard too. I also encourage you to start, enhance, add more natives to your yard. These are all from my yard. And I'm just going to recap. Reducing runoff, while it might be okay for the creeks, there is a tie-in to everybody that drives. The picture on the left is me driving, and if anybody's ever gone off of Red Mountain Expressway right there, that was after a quick shower. And sometimes our storm drains get clogged of different items because people shove and stuff and other things in them. But sometimes, again, our weather is so torrential at times that we just don't have places for our water to go. So if you don't think what you do matters, think again. Every small drop that you can collect helps the overall system. So maybe before today, you never thought about it. Maybe you didn't know about it. So now that I've taught you and given you a different perspective on stormwater, what decision will you make? Would you make a different decision next time? After all, health, safety, property values are all dependent on clean water. And it's always toe tingling in the summer to have safe, clean water for you to put your little titsy toes in and cool off. I've got some resources here that I've used to compile my presentation, and also other local resources that might be beneficial to you. And with that, do we have any questions? Oh my gosh, I thought it was longer than that. I talked fast.
All right, so right now we only have one question, and it is from David LaRussa. I'm having severe stormwater flooding and erosion on my property. Who do I contact for help? Thanks.
It depends on what city that you live in. So you can contact my office, and whatever city that you live in, I can get you to their agency. So we have the City of Birmingham, we have Jefferson County Unincorporated, Hoover, Bessemer, Leeds. And then we have a conglomerate, which is the Stormwater Management Authority, that manages about 20 cities. And that would be through Scott Hofer at the Health Department. But I have all their contacts and be happy to help you coordinate that.
What's the number for you?
205-392-5800. 325-8741.
And I just sent that to the question. So if you go to your question and answer section, you will
David's in Mountain
see
Brook.
that it's answered.
So that would be, you can contact your local city hall, and also Scott Hofer and Janika Smith with, they are the Jefferson County Department of Health Watershed Protection Program. They administer different stormwater permits on behalf of the city of Mountain Brook, but they would be your contact. But you can call me and I can give you their email address. But you can also start with the city of Mountain Brook too, and their public works department if it's on the right of way.
All right. I have another question. Sandra Haltzclaw, which I think I forwarded her email to you earlier. She had the same problem and she sent me pictures. You forwarded it to some people earlier for us.
Yeah, and she was in Irondale. So again, Scott Hofer, Janika Smith, they also, Irondale is within the Stormwater Management Authority program. Oh, thank you, Janine. I'm a real visual person, and it occurred to me a few years ago, I need to start showing people what I'm talking about instead of trying to describe it. I also see, and I can't get back right above Janine, there's a question about ground cisterns. What conditions or landscapes are good conditions for cisterns?
Okay.
So basically a cistern is going to be a large collection. It's just going to be a big holding area. You could do French drains that go into that area, but you can contact landscape companies that can help you put that together. And as far as good conditions, everybody's landscape is going to be slightly different. Your soils are going to be different. Your runoff is going to be different. So what I would do is contact a local landscaping company. And if not, go down and contact a local landscaping company and just talk to them about what you're interested in doing and let them come out, because everyone's going to be tailored to your site condition.
I have another question from Betsy, and I hope I get this right. I think she wants to know what tree ordinances we have in place to encourage people to maintain the tree canopy, if there are any tree ordinances.
There are. That would be at a local city. So you need to contact your local municipality about tree ordinances. I know Homewood and Mountain Brook off the top of my head have tree ordinances. I encourage you to work with your elected officials to see what we can do about maintaining our tree ordinance, maintaining trees and tree canopies, because I think they're fantastic. I have a huge maple in my front yard and it gives me shade in the summertime. And I'm doing everything I can to keep that maple, because whatever the maple is, it definitely helps me combat water issues coming off my street. I love my maple, and it's beautiful.
And June Mays would like you to repeat the instructions for rain barrel runoff.
Repeat the instructions for a rain barrel runoff?
Yeah, I think you gave a couple of options for rain barrel runoff, like how to manage it in your yard, like whether you have 2 barrels and if those overflow, where does it go?
Oh, okay. I'm also going to, and we can send Rhonda if you're here. We call Rhonda the rain barrel babe. She's got all the information about how to hook up rain barrels and so on and so forth. But real simple. Rain barrels are a collection device from downspouts. There's different items that you can purchase that help divert water from your downspout into your barrel. When your barrel fills, water then would go back into your normal downspout system. Or you can simply allow your rain barrels, the way you hook them up and attach them, you can fill up multiple rain barrels. But you can put them on any area of the house where you get water off of your roof is the best place to put them. You should have them off the ground a little bit, because if you, the higher it is off the ground, the better the flow out of the rain barrels. They're it's not a lot of maintenance to have them, and I highly recommend if you do. We can send you information and also get you in contact with Rhonda, who is phenomenal when it comes. And if you want to purchase a rain barrel every year, Father's Day weekend at the Botanical Gardens, we have a rain barrel workshop, and you can purchase the barrel and attend our virtual class as well.
Okay, I have one other question. For backyard pathways that get flooded during a storm, what material works best to put around concrete pavers? Sand, dirt, etc. have washed away and left the pavers raised above the soil and are a tripping hazard.
If you send me a picture of what your backyard looks like, it would be helpful, because areas that have slopes, you're going to want to use pine straw and not pine bark. Pine bark will just wash. You can use gravel. If you don't contain your gravel, you might need to put up some landscape timbers on the side so that you can contain your gravel. I like Selma Brown. I get it locally here at Cahaba Heights Hardware. Probably shouldn't say that, but I like Selma Brown gravel. They'll even deliver it. It allows, you need to put enough inches so that the water can absorb down into it. Small stones would also work, and you could get that at you can get these at a lot of landscaping areas. So I apologize, I didn't mean to just call out where I purchased mine. They deliver, and that's why I use them. But you can do that as well. And if you are interested, there's you might consider like that ground creeping thyme. There's also a ground creeping phlox that you can put around your landscape pavers, and that would also help hold the dirt, would help manage the runoff because you've got the root structures. And so I'd also consider some low-growing ground covers. And if you're near the Botanical Gardens, you're always welcome to come and look at my yard and see what's worked and what hasn't. I've been playing in my yard for almost coming up 17 years, and it is one big stormwater practice. What works, what doesn't work.
Okay, I don't see any other questions.
Oh, we just got a new one.
Where?
It's Sims Garden in Homewood, if anyone is interested. Oh, rain barrels and bioswales. Oh, yay. Oh, I'm glad to know that, because I'm always out looking for local pictures. So, Amy, thank you for posting that. Hooray. Yeah. Okay. So that's good that you can actually see them in action. And one thing I encourage people to do, grab an umbrella, put on some rain boots, grab an umbrella, and go outside when it rains. Now, not in the middle of a hurricane or a tornado. All right. But go out and pay attention. Where does your water flow? Where is it going? And look and see. Go, if you're near Homewood, look at Sims Garden and see what they do and see how the bioswales work, how you capture and hold that water. And if you're ever out at Jefferson Park, it's pretty awesome. And I think you'll be shocked and amazed at how much runoff you have, and once you start installing these options, how much runoff that you're actually saving. I get very little runoff in my yard now, and again, I've been doing it for 17 years and playing around with different aspects. So
Okay. Oh, I have a question and answer. Do you have a list of local folks who can help design water control for small properties, homes?
When you're saying water control, like putting in drainage systems and helping you?
I think so.
Yes, there are. Yes, I don't mind. And my list is not extensive, but I do, because I've had some questions and I know people that have worked with different local organizations. So yes. And the thing is if you have a landscaping company, ask them about it. And I'm also going to say this, when you hire somebody, John Neighbors with Alabama Green Industrial Training Center would vouch, you always want to get a quote, call several people. Sometimes and just hear what different people have to say. There's not one way to deal with water on your property. And different aspects are going to cost different levels. And sometimes, just like when you go and hire a design person for your yard, they're going to come up with different plans. Or if you watch HGTV, yeah, they always have 3 and they always come and what do you want? So I highly recommend that you do your research, talk to different people, and see what they're going, see what works, see what they can provide. So no matter who it is. But yes, if you do, I can send you some people that I've worked with and different people also have worked with.
Okay.
Hey, Betsy, I see that you're on here. Yay, Shades Creek. You probably have a good picture that I could use in my presentation for how the floodplain worked along Shades Creek Parkway.
Oh, yeah.
Or Lakeshore.
All right. I think Cindy Brown also said that she would love a list of consultants. So
yeah, if y'all will email me, I will definitely give you information. And like, my list is not exhaustive. So I'm not saying one company's better than any other ones. I just know that those are that deal with stormwater stuff.
is it .org or .com for your email address?
jccal.org.
All right, I just put it in the chat for everyone who needs to contact Hana for the list of consultants. And I always send it to that one because that's the one that works best for me.
Yeah, I got married, and once you start at the county, all emails go back to your original email. So, and my real name is Hana, so that's where the Burwinkle J comes in.
All right, do we have any more questions? Last call for questions. You can type it in the chat or in the question and answer section. You're welcome, Betsy.
We love you. You do great job and you do great work. And Friends of Shades Creek is a phenomenal organization. Y'all do really great stuff.
Okay, we're gonna count down. Last call for questions. 10, 9, 8,
Bye,
7,
everybody.
6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We hope that you'll join us again in 2 weeks. Hana, do you remember what our session is for the next one?
Oh no, I've just been looking at this one because it was my presentation.
Yeah, let me look that up real quick just so I can let y'all know what we're going to be doing. I feel like it's house plants, but I could be wrong.
And we're excited. We've been doing these Lunch and Learn series for several years now, and we appreciate each and every one of you participating and being flexible enough to have them on the Zoom platform. So we're real excited.
All right, and I was wrong. It's actually going to be shade gardening.
Oh, wow. Yay.
Yeah, so we're going to do shade gardening next on July 29th. And then after shade gardening is going to be Houseplants 101 with Caitlin Hastings of Botanical. I always want to say Britannica.
Y'all are going to be in for a treat. I'm real excited about our topics this year.
All right. Thank you all. And we will see you in 2 weeks. Have a great afternoon, y'all.